It was a rainy Thursday evening when Alexander Reed, the elusive billionaire known more for boardrooms than bars, found himself seated in a small, unassuming diner on the outskirts of the city. His sleek black Rolls-Royce had broken down en route to a charity gala, and while the driver fussed with roadside assistance, Alexander sought temporary shelter inside the neon-lit diner. He sat at a booth near the window, the dim overhead lights casting gentle shadows across his sharply tailored suit. Steam rose from the coffee in his porcelain mug as he observed the humdrum rhythm of the place. It wasn't the kind of spot someone like him would frequent, but something about its worn leather seats and scratchy jukebox tunes whispered of simpler times he had long abandoned. Then he saw her. She moved between tables with practiced ease, a faint limp in her step and a hollow tiredness in her eyes. The waitress, young, perhaps mid-20s, wore a tired smile for every customer, but it didn't quite reach her bruised cheek. A bluish-purple mark stretched beneath her left eye, barely hidden by makeup. Another fading blotch trailed down her neck. Alexander's brows furrowed instinctively. When she approached his table to refill his coffee, her hand trembled slightly. "Rough night?" he asked gently, trying to keep his tone casual. She paused. Her eyes flicked toward his, hesitant, guarded. "Something like that," she replied with a forced smile. But Alexander wasn't one to ignore details. Years in business had sharpened his ability to read people, and he knew fear when he saw it. As she turned away, he said softly, "You don't have to pretend. Whatever happened to you, no one deserves that." She froze mid-step. Turning back slowly, her expression changed. The mask slipped for a moment, and vulnerability peeked through. "It's complicated," she whispered, eyes shining. "No one really listens." "I will," he said, surprising even himself. "I have time." That sentence unraveled her. Minutes later, she returned during her break and sat across from him, clutching her apron in both hands. Her name was Emma. She had once dreamed of studying music, had a scholarship lined up, and a voice that could melt hearts. But life had other plans: her father's sudden death, a manipulative boyfriend named Travis, and a web of control and abuse she didn't even notice tightening around her until it was too late. "He says he loves me," she murmured, voice barely audible. "But the love hurts. He didn't always hit me, you know. At first, he just didn't like my friends. Then he wanted to handle my money. Then he said no one else would want someone like me." Her hands trembled. Alexander's chest tightened. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, but sitting across from this fragile woman, he felt helpless. Furious. Protective. "Emma," he said, voice steady, "you don't have to stay there. There are places, people, who can help you. I can help you." She looked at him skeptically. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," he replied. "No one should live in fear. And if you want out, I'll help you find the door." Emma blinked. The rain outside picked up, hammering softly against the windows like nature itself wanted to drown out the echoes of her pain. "I don't have family anymore," she said quietly. "Nowhere to go." "You do now," he said. "Even if you just need a safe place for a night, someone to call the police with you, someone to stand by you, consider it done." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes brimmed with tears, and for the first time in years, she let them fall freely. The diner's manager, a greasy man with too much cologne and too little tact, walked over, eyeing Alexander with suspicion. "Everything all right here?" Before Emma could answer, Alexander stood, adjusting his cufflinks with cool composure. "No, it isn't." The manager narrowed his eyes. "This young woman is resigning," Alexander said calmly. "Effective immediately. I'm sure you understand." "Wait, what? You can't just..." Alexander pulled a sleek black card from his wallet and laid it on the table. "I'm Mr. Reed. I own this block, including your lease. You will not question her again. Is that clear?" The manager paled. Emma stared at Alexander, stunned. "Let's go," he said gently. As they stepped out into the rain, Emma looked up, her face tilted toward the sky. The cool drops mingled with her tears, but for once, they felt cleansing. He opened the passenger door for her. "Where are we going?" she asked, almost afraid to hope. "Somewhere safe," he answered. "And after that, anywhere you want." In the weeks that followed, Alexander pulled every string, called every favor, and arranged for Emma to stay in a secure apartment under the care of a trauma counselor and women's advocacy group. He never imposed, never pressured her for anything in return. But he checked in, sent flowers, dropped off music sheets, even arranged a quiet audition at a local lounge when she felt ready. Emma sang that night. Her voice, raw and rich with emotion, poured from her like sunlight after a storm. The room went silent, and Alexander, seated in the back, clapped the loudest when she finished. She saw him, and her smile was real this time. "I owe you everything," she said when they met outside the lounge. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "You saved yourself. I just opened the door." But the truth was, she had changed him too. She reminded him that his fortune could be more than profit and power. It could be a bridge to someone else's freedom. And maybe, just maybe, a path to something deeper than the cold comfort of success. As the night deepened and the city lights shimmered like distant stars against the velvet sky, Alexander and Emma walked side by side in silence. The quiet between them wasn't awkward, it was full. Full of questions neither dared ask yet, and answers that didn't need words. He opened the door to his car and gestured for her to get in. She hesitated only for a second before sliding into the leather seat, the warmth of the interior a stark contrast to the cool air outside. Alexander got in beside her, and for a moment, they just sat there. The hum of the engine was the only sound. "Where to now?" she finally asked, her voice softer, braver. "I was thinking of grabbing something sweet," he said, offering a small smile. "Ever been to Luma's bakery?" Her brow lifted in surprise. "The one that opens all night?" He nodded. "Best chocolate tart in the city. Consider it a celebration." Emma chuckled under her breath. "A celebration of quitting my job and finally breathing again?" "That," he said, shifting gears, "and of singing in public again." The car pulled away from the curb, gliding down streets still wet from the rain. They didn't talk much on the drive. Words seemed unnecessary. The warm silence was more eloquent than conversation. Emma leaned her head slightly against the window, watching the passing lights blur into lines of gold and white. For once, she didn't feel like she had to flinch at every red light or check the rearview mirror. For once, she felt safe. Luma's was quiet at this hour, the smell of freshly baked bread and sugary warmth greeting them like an embrace. The owner, a plump elderly woman with a voice like velvet and a laugh that shook the air, immediately recognized Alexander. "Well, well," she said, sliding her glasses down her nose. "Back again, Mr. Reed. And who's this lovely girl with you?" Alexander glanced at Emma, then smiled. "A friend with a well-deserved appetite." They chose a booth near the kitchen where it was warmer, and the sound of clinking dishes mixed with soft jazz. Emma bit into a slice of chocolate tart, and her eyes widened. "Okay," she said, licking a bit of chocolate from the corner of her lips. "That's magic." Alexander chuckled. "Told you." It was in that small, cozy bakery, surrounded by the scent of cinnamon and sugar, that Emma started to feel like herself again. Or perhaps like someone new. Someone reborn. Her laughter wasn't guarded, and her shoulders no longer curled inward as though preparing for impact. She met Alexander's gaze easily now, even teasing him about his apparently frequent late-night dessert trips. "You do this often?" she asked, sipping hot cocoa. "Not really," he said. "But lately, I've been realizing that life's too short to eat dinner without dessert." She smiled, not just at the joke, but at what she saw behind his words. A man used to walls, now learning to open doors. And maybe, just maybe, not just for her sake. They left Luma's around 1 a.m., the streets nearly empty, the sky beginning to flirt with dawn. As he walked her to the elevator of the residence he'd arranged for her, Emma paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you helping me?" she asked, eyes searching his. "Really?" He looked down for a moment, then met her gaze. "Because I see strength in you," he said. "Because I've been powerful for so long, but I forgot what it means to matter, really matter. And because the world failed you more than once, and I didn't want to be another bystander who did nothing." Emma's throat tightened. Her voice caught. "I'm scared. That it won't last. That I'll mess it all up." "You won't," he said. "And even if you do, you get back up. That's the thing about people like you. You don't stay down for long." The elevator doors opened behind her. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. He took a step forward, close enough that she could see the quiet conviction in his eyes. "You don't have to." The doors closed between them, and as Alexander walked back to his car, he felt something stir deep within. Not guilt, not pity, but a rare, unfamiliar sense of purpose. A sense that he had just made a choice that would echo through both their lives in ways neither of them could yet understand. Days passed, then weeks. Emma blossomed. Her face was no longer marked by fear, but by radiance. She enrolled in vocal training, applied for part-time work at a music store, and even volunteered at a women's shelter to support others walking the path she had once been trapped in. Every now and then, Alexander would appear at her performances, always sitting quietly in the back, never demanding attention. But their conversations grew longer, their dinners more frequent. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, Alexander waited for her outside the venue. She emerged with roses in hand, beaming. "You stayed again," she said, brushing a curl from her face. "I always will." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're not like other men I've known." He grinned faintly. "I should hope not." She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "You gave me back my voice." He looked at her, really looked. "You always had it. You just needed someone to remind you how powerful it was." In that moment, beneath the halo of the street lamp, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, at least not yet, but something just as profound. A trust forged in darkness and strengthened in light. A connection not born of rescue, but of recognition. They were two people who had lost different things, innocence, hope, purpose, and somehow, in each other, found a reason to believe again. And life, as if honoring their silent promise, began to bloom anew. Months later, as spring unfurled its blossoms across the city, Emma stood on the grand stage of the Ellington Theatre, an elegant venue draped in velvet and gold, where the echoes of legendary voices still lingered in the walls. The lights dimmed, casting a soft glow across the rows of expectant faces. Her heart pounded with anticipation, but not fear. She wasn't that same fragile soul who had once wiped away tears behind a diner's counter. She was whole. She was home. Backstage, just moments before, she had stood before the mirror in her dressing room, staring into the reflection of the woman she had become. No bruises. No fear. No chains. Only grace and determination. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been a climb, jagged and steep, but she had reached this summit not by accident, but by choice. By resilience. And by the kindness of one man whose compassion had become the catalyst for her transformation. As she walked out to center stage, the applause that welcomed her wasn't merely for the music she was about to perform. It was for her story, the silent anthem of survival and renewal. In the third row, seated alone, Alexander Reed watched with quiet pride. His suit was understated this time, his presence unnoticed by most. But for Emma, he was the brightest light in the audience. The moment their eyes met, a smile passed between them, one that held volumes. It wasn't a fairy tale glance. It was richer than that. It was a shared truth, a nod to every silent moment, every gesture, every promise that had brought them to this evening. The piano played its opening notes. She lifted the microphone with steady hands and sang. Her voice was haunting and bold, drenched in emotion and clarity, as if each note held fragments of the life she had lived. The room was captivated. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause, suspended in her melody. Her voice told stories of pain, hope, courage, and second chances. And somewhere in the harmonies, there was a whisper of Alexander's name, not spoken aloud, but felt in every rise and fall of her tone. Tears glistened in eyes across the auditorium. People who had never known Emma found pieces of themselves in her. When the last note faded into silence, the audience sat breathless, as though exhaling for the first time. And then, thunderous applause. She bowed, graceful and humble, and walked off the stage with the power of a queen returning from war. Backstage, her manager hugged her, strangers congratulated her, but she moved through them like a thread through silk, calm, focused. She found Alexander waiting near the exit, a quiet smile on his face. He didn't say anything immediately, nor did she. The noise of the world fell away in the space between them. "You didn't just sing," he finally said. "You healed." Emma stepped closer, her voice warm and certain. "I sang for every woman still stuck behind locked doors. For the girl I used to be. And for the man who believed I could be more." Alexander's gaze softened. "You are more. So much more." She took his hand, not out of dependence but gratitude, unity. A gesture not of needing to be saved, but of choosing to walk forward together. The gala that followed was dazzling. Sponsors and patrons praised Emma, critics whispered that a star had been born, and the media buzzed about her mysterious benefactor. But for Emma and Alexander, the flash of cameras meant little. In a quiet corner of the rooftop where the city lights glittered beneath them, they stood together, their shoulders touching, their eyes fixed on the skyline. "I used to think I had to carry everything alone," Emma said, sipping her champagne. "But you showed me that strength doesn't always mean silence." Sometimes it's accepting help, admitting pain. He looked at her, his voice low. And you showed me that wealth means nothing if it's not used to lift others. A pause. Then she smiled. I think we both saved each other. He nodded. That's the real miracle, isn't it? In the months that followed, Emma launched a foundation for abused women, the Phoenix Project. It offered shelter, counseling, education, and a platform for survivors to reclaim their lives. With Alexander's discreet funding and her fierce passion, it became a sanctuary for those seeking not just survival, but rebirth. She continued to perform, each concert a celebration of the past she overcame and the future she built. And at every major event, one seat in the front row was always reserved for the man who never asked for recognition, who never tried to possess her light, but instead helped ignite it. Their bond deepened, not in the hurried flurry of romance, but in the quiet steadfastness of two people who understood each other's broken pieces and decided to build something beautiful from them. Eventually, yes, love bloomed. Not the kind born of fairy tales, but the kind forged in fire and faith, where trust was sacred and affection unshaken by time. Years later, at the grand opening of a new Phoenix shelter in another city, Emma stood before a crowd of women, some holding children, others holding themselves together for the first time. She told her story, not of trauma, but of triumph. She spoke not as a victim, but as a warrior. And in the crowd, as always, Alexander stood watching with the same awe he had felt that night in the diner. The night a bruised young woman dared to trust a stranger and changed both their lives forever. She closed her speech with the words she had etched into the foundation's mission. Asterisk, every scar is a chapter. Every tear is a seed. And every voice, when finally heard, can change the world. Asterisk. The crowd rose to their feet in applause. And as she stepped down from the podium, Alexander caught her hand in his, squeezing it gently. Together, they walked into the future they never saw coming. Not as hero and rescued, not as billionaire and waitress, but as partners in a story where pain gave way to purpose, and where love, in its purest form, was simply the promise of never letting each other fall again.